November 12, 1949, 11:42 p.m. The VIP balcony of the Renaissance Ballroom, 2348 7th Avenue. Frank Costello, the Prime Minister of the Underworld, sits opposite Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. Between them sits a single glass of amber liquid. It looks like 18-year-old scotch. It smells like peat and oak, but inside that crystal tumbler is enough cyanide to stop a man's heart in 45 seconds. Costello is smiling, his manicured fingers resting on a gold cigarette case. He has just offered a toast to mutual prosperity, but Bumpy doesn't lift the glass. Instead, his hand moves under the table. A switchblade clicks open. The sound is soft, metallic, and final. Bumpy places the blade tip against Costello's silk tie right over the sternum. "Frankie," Bumpy whispers, his eyes dead flat, "you look thirsty." The music from the jazz orchestra below swells, masking the deathly quiet of the balcony. Two of the most powerful men in America are locked in a stare-down. One has poison, the other has steel, and only one of them is leaving this table alive. 3 weeks earlier, the delicate ecosystem of New York organized crime was fracturing. Bumpy Johnson was 44 years old and at the absolute peak of his influence. He wasn't just a gangster, he was the de facto mayor of Harlem. He controlled the numbers rackets, the unions, and the streets with an intellect that rivaled any corporate CEO. While other bosses ruled through brute force, Bumpy ruled through chess moves. He walked the streets of 125th like a king, tipping his hat to church elders and paying tuition for neighborhood kids. But beneath the gentleman's exterior was a man who had survived gang wars that turned weaker men into memories. The autumn of 1949 was politically volatile. Mayor William O'Dwyer was under pressure to crack down on corruption, and the Italian syndicate needed a scapegoat. The five families were looking to consolidate power, and Harlem was the prize they couldn't quite grasp. The black numbers game was generating an estimated $50 million annually, and the Italians wanted a bigger cut than the 40% Bumpy allowed them. The tension was suffocating. Every meeting was a potential ambush. Every phone call was tapped. The syndicate knew they couldn't take Bumpy in a street war. His soldiers were too loyal, and the terrain of Harlem was a labyrinth only locals understood. They needed to remove the head of the snake, surgically. They needed a method that looked like natural causes or an accident. They turned to their most sophisticated operator, Frank Costello. Frank Costello was not a thug. He was a politician with a pistol. Known as the Prime Minister, Costello preferred bribes to bullets. He had judges, senators, and police chiefs on his payroll. He considered violence a failure of diplomacy. However, when diplomacy failed, his solutions were absolute. He didn't want a bloody war on 125th Street that would bring heat from the feds. He wanted a quiet transition of power. Costello wanted the Harlem policy banks absorbed into the Genovese family structure completely. He viewed Bumpy as an obstacle to corporate efficiency. He respected Bumpy's intelligence, which made him all the more dangerous. Costello believed that if Bumpy were removed, the Harlem hierarchy would splinter into chaos, allowing the Italians to sweep in and pick up the pieces for pennies on the dollar. Costello was dangerous because he was charming. He would buy you dinner, ask about your mother, and have you killed before the dessert arrived. He had arranged the disappearances of at least 12 high-ranking rivals in the last decade, often through heart attacks or sudden unexplained illnesses. On November 10th, Costello sent an invitation to Bumpy, a private sit-down at the Renaissance Ballroom. Neutral ground, a peace offering. He claimed he wanted to discuss a new distribution deal for heroin coming through the French Connection. In reality, he had acquired a colorless, odorless toxin from a contact in a chemical plant in New Jersey. It mimicked cardiac arrest. It was the perfect murder weapon for a crowded room. The setup was elegant in its simplicity. Costello had rented the private VIP box overlooking the dance floor. It was secluded, curtained off from the main crowd, yet public enough to deter a shooting. He had arrived 30 minutes early to prepare. He poured 2 drinks. One was clean, one was laced. He marked the poisoned glass with a microscopic chip on the rim, invisible unless you knew where to look. 11:20 p.m. The Renaissance Ballroom. The sensory details are overwhelming. The air is thick with the scent of gardenias, expensive perfume, and cigarette smoke. The jazz orchestra is playing a frantic bebop tune, the saxophones screaming over the thrum of the double bass. The room is a sea of tuxedos and evening gowns, diamonds glittering under the chandeliers. Laughter rises and falls like waves. 11:30 p.m. Bumpy arrives. He is wearing a midnight blue tuxedo, a white carnation in his lapel. He walks up the velvet stairs to the balcony. He moves with a predator's grace, scanning the shadows, checking the exits. He nods to the guard at the door but doesn't smile. 11:35 p.m. Costello stands, extending a hand. Ellsworth, you look like $1,000,000. Frankie, Bumpy replies, shaking the hand briefly. You look like a man with a heavy conscience. They sit. The table is small, intimate. The noise from the party below acts as a privacy screen. 11:38 p.m. Costello gestures to the drinks. To the future. To Harlem and the Bronx. Working together, he picks up the clean glass. He leaves the chipped glass for Bumpy. Bumpy looks at the drink. The amber liquid catches the light. Clink. Costello raises his glass, waiting. 11:40 p.m. Bumpy doesn't move. He stares at the bubbles rising in the whiskey. He smells the faint, almost imperceptible scent of almonds, not from the drink, but from the anxiety radiating off Costello. The Prime Minister is sweating, just a bead on his temple. Drink up, Ellsworth. It's 18-year-old single malt. A gift. 11:41 p.m. I'm not thirsty, Frank, Bumpy says softly. It's bad luck to refuse a toast, Costello insists, his smile tightening. It's disrespectful. Then Bumpy's hand vanishes beneath the table. The click is audible only to them. The blade presses into the silk tie. 11:42 p.m. You know what's disrespectful, Frank? Bumpy leans forward, thinking I'm stupid. Bumpy reaches out with his free hand. He doesn't take his glass. He takes Costello's glass. He slides the chipped glass to death glass directly in front of the Italian boss. We're going to switch, Bumpy says. I like your glass better. The room held its breath. What Frank Costello didn't know was that Bumpy Johnson had eyes inside the kitchen. Bumpy hadn't just walked into the Renaissance ballroom on a hunch. At 4 p.m. that afternoon, a busboy named Marcus, whose grandmother lived in a building Bumpy owned, had seen Costello's associate tampering with a vial in the service pantry. Marcus didn't know what it was, but he knew it wasn't sugar. He had run 6 blocks to Bumpy's office at the Fat Man's Candy Store to deliver the news. Bumpy knew the drink was poisoned. He knew the method, but he didn't cancel the meeting. Cancellation was weakness. He needed to turn the trap into a lesson. Bumpy presses the knife harder. The tip pierces the silk. A tiny drop of blood blooms on Costello's white shirt. Drink it, Frank. Costello freezes. The charm evaporates. The politician is gone. Only the terrified animal remains. He stares at the glass. He knows exactly what is inside. He knows the dosage. Ellsworth, don't be crazy, Costello stammers, his voice cracking. It's just a misunderstanding. Then drink it, Bumpy commands. If it's just whiskey, you have nothing to worry about. If it's not, well, you wouldn't serve a guest something you wouldn't drink yourself, would you? Bumpy taps the glass with his finger. Tink. 3 seconds, Frank. 1. Costello looks at the knife. He looks at Bumpy's eyes. They are black holes. 2. Costello's hand shakes violently. He reaches for the glass. He lifts it. The liquid sloshes over the rim. 3. Costello brings the glass to his lips. He smells the death he prepared for another man. He looks at Bumpy, pleading silently. Bumpy doesn't blink. Costello tilts his head back, but he doesn't drink. He flings the glass against the wall. Smash. The sound shatters the moment. The whiskey splashes onto the velvet curtains. Where the liquid hits, the fabric darkens instantly. Costello is breathing heavily, gasping like a drowning man. You're a maniac, he whispers. Bumpy retracts the knife. He calmly picks up the other glass, the clean one. He takes a sip. And you, Bumpy says, savoring the scotch, are a terrible host. 11:45 p.m. The tension breaks, but the danger remains. Costello is humiliated. He sits back, wiping the sweat from his face with a trembling handkerchief. He has been bested at his own game in front of the ghosts of the men he intended to kill. Bumpy stands up. He adjusts his tuxedo jacket. He places the empty clean glass on the table. Next time you want to kill me, Frank, Bumpy says, his voice loud enough for the guards outside to hear. Bring a gun. It's more honest. Bumpy turns and walks away. He descends the stairs, moving through the crowd that is still dancing, oblivious to the drama that just played out above their heads. He walks out of the Renaissance ballroom and into the Harlem night. Costello remained in the booth for another hour. He couldn't move his legs. He ordered his men to clean up the shattered glass immediately. The ripple effects were seismic. Word of the failed toast spread through the underworld by morning. It was a massive loss of face for Costello. The message was clear. Bumpy Johnson was not just a street fighter, he was a master tactician who could smell a trap before it was set. The Italian syndicate backed off. The aggressive push for the Harlem numbers bank ceased. For the next 3 years, until his imprisonment in Alcatraz, Bumpy operated with near total autonomy. Costello never attempted to assassinate him again. They eventually reached a business arrangement, but it was on Bumpy's terms, signed with the invisible ink of that night's victory. This encounter at the Renaissance Ballroom is the definitive Bumpy Johnson story. It encapsulates the intellectual gangster archetype. He didn't scream. He didn't start a shootout that would have killed innocent bystanders. He used psychological warfare to dismantle one of the most powerful men in America. It reveals that Bumpy's true weapon wasn't the knife. It was his composure. He had the discipline to sit across from his executioner and wait for the perfect moment to reverse the polarity of the room. He understood that in the world of high-stakes crime, fear is a more potent poison than cyanide. The lesson is universal. When your enemy thinks they are playing a game of chance, make sure you have already fixed the outcome. True power is staying calm when the other man is holding the ace, because you know the ace is marked. If this story showed you why Bumpy Johnson was the only man Frank Costello feared, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like if you respect the chess game. Comment below, what would you have done if you were in that chair? Next week, we investigate the lost tapes of Lucky Luciano admitting that Harlem was the one territory he could never conquer.